Pause. Just for a second. Before you scroll past this video like every other one, I only have one question. A question you won't want to hear. But if you have the courage to face it, it could forever change the way you see the world. Have you ever felt like you're alive, but not really living? You smile at the right time. You nod when expected. You do the right thing. Say the right words. But deep down, there's a hollow space. No shape, no name, just a silent emptiness that eats away at everything. Not because you're weak, not because you haven't tried hard enough, but because you might be living a life that was never truly yours. A script written before you knew who you were. A role assigned to you by a world that never asked what you wanted to be. You were taught to be good, to be kind, to sacrifice, to wait for recognition, to believe that if you did everything right, the world would return the favor. But now, look around. You did everything right. And they left you. You were honest. And they ignored you. You loved with everything you had. And all you got was silence. That's not your fault. That's the system. A system built not to awaken you, but to keep you obedient while feeding you the illusion of choice. This video won't comfort you. It won't tell you you're special. It won't promise you things will be okay. But if you've ever looked in the mirror and felt lost in your own skin, if you've ever wondered why doing all the right things still got you nowhere, then maybe this isn't the beginning of a video. It's the end of a dream and the start of an awakening. You were born with a blank page, but before you could write a single word, they had already decided your story. They gave you a name, then rules, then labels, then limits, and they said, this is who you are. Be polite, be quiet, be useful, be small. Don't ask questions, don't stand out, don't want too much, don't need too loud. You didn't resist, because no one told you resistance was allowed. You trusted, because they told you trust is what makes you good. So you did it all. You smiled when it hurt. You sacrificed without being asked. You waited and waited. You thought that's what strong people do. That goodness would lead to rewards. That being selfless would make you sacred. And for a while, they praised you. They said you were mature, easy to be around, so well-behaved, so thoughtful. But slowly, you began to notice something. The ones who lied were rewarded. The ones who took shortcuts were promoted. The ones who made noise were heard. You kept doing right and kept being passed over. You showed loyalty. They used it. You stayed kind. They drained you. You spoke truth. They disappeared. And somehow, you still blamed yourself. Maybe I'm not patient enough. Maybe I need to try harder. Maybe I need to be even more humble. More nice. More giving. But no, it wasn't your kindness that failed. It was the script. A script written not to empower you, but to pacify you. You weren't raised to be powerful. You were trained to be predictable, useful, agreeable, expendable. They never showed you how to protect your voice. They only taught you how to be liked. They didn't teach you how to lead, only how to follow in silence. And the more you obeyed, the more you disappeared. You were never taught how to choose yourself, only how to wait to be chosen, wait to be noticed, wait to be promoted, wait to be loved, wait for life to begin, while your real self quietly rotted beneath the mask. That's not life. That's performance. You became a loyal actor in someone else's show, memorizing lines before you even knew your name. You kept the scene alive even as your soul died. And every time you asked, What's wrong with me? You missed the real question. Who wrote this role I'm stuck playing? You never questioned the rules because you were told breaking them meant you were bad. But what if the rules were never meant to protect you? What if they were meant to make you easy to manage? You believed in structure, in obedience, in the rewards of being good. But look around. Who benefits from your performance? Certainly not you. They never wanted you to awaken. They wanted you to behave, to keep the machine running, to stay on script. But now you're starting to forget your lines. And that is the first sign you're waking up. If this message spoke to something buried inside you, help us share it with those still asleep. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this. And subscribe to the channel if you're walking this path of awakening with us. If you want to support the team behind this work, you can send a super thanks below. Every gesture means more than you know and helps us create deeper, sharper, more honest content every week. Let's keep going, because the story they wrote for you is not how it ends. From the beginning, you were taught that obedience is virtue, that doing what you're told makes you good, that self-sacrifice makes you honorable, that waiting makes you wise. But they never told you who gains from your silence, who profits when you delay your voice, who rises higher every time you choose to shrink. You thought being good would protect you, but they never meant to protect you. They meant to pacify you. You were rewarded when you stayed quiet, praised when you stepped aside, celebrated when you gave more than you could afford. And all the while, you thought that meant you were on the right path. That being noble meant never saying no. That restraint made you worthy. But what has it really given you? You apologize first. Even when you're not wrong, you avoid confrontation. Even when you're being violated, you give endlessly and still feel guilty when you finally say, enough. Why? Because they taught you morality but not discernment. They told you to be selfless, but not when to stop giving. They told you to be honest, but not how to guard your truth. You were programmed to follow, but never taught to lead. You were praised for sacrificing, but never empowered to protect. Because the moment you become aware, truly aware, you're no longer manageable. And for them, that's a threat. So they gave you a story, a beautiful lie, that the good will be rewarded. That fairness always wins. That suffering makes you stronger. But Machiavelli would laugh, because in the real world, power does not kneel to goodness. It bows to leverage. And those who survive are not the purest, but the most awake. You've been loyal. You've been patient. You've been kind. But who has that kindness protected? Who has that patience elevated? Not you. Your selflessness has made you useful but not respected, because the world doesn't run on virtue. It runs on perception, on strategy, on power. And you were never trained for that. You were trained to play a game you didn't even know you were in. A game of power, played behind smiles, behind policy, behind polite language and quiet betrayals. And that's why you keep losing, because you're still playing by moral rules in an amoral world, still believing that suffering earns favor, still thinking that loyalty buys you safety, still hoping that your silence will be interpreted as strength. But ask yourself, how many times have you been exploited while thinking you were being noble? That's not strength. That's programming. And the worst part is, they made you fear shedding that programming. They told you that once you let go of innocence, you'd become corrupted. That if you let go of obedience, you'd lose your soul. But here's the truth. Letting go of obedience is not the loss of your morality. It's the beginning of your sovereignty. Real morality doesn't ask you to be blind. It demands that you be clear. It doesn't ask you to surrender. It asks you to choose. So, if you're tired of being good and getting walked over for it, then ask yourself, what if your goodness was never meant to protect you, but to pacify you? What if the most ethical thing you can do right now is to stop obeying and start observing? Start discerning. Start becoming someone they can no longer use. You were told to be kind. So you were. You held the door. You said sorry, even when you weren't wrong. You gave second chances, even when they didn't deserve a first. Because you believed kindness would protect you. That if you poured good into the world would pour it back. But what if I told you kindness, without strength, doesn't protect you? It exposes you. It doesn't keep you safe. It marks you. Like the scent of blood in water, it tells the predators exactly where to bite. You thought being kind meant you'd be loved. But in their eyes, it meant you wouldn't fight back. You became the helper, the listener, the one who always understands. You stitched their wounds, cleaned their mess, held space for their chaos. But when it was your turn to fall apart, they disappeared. You gave softness to people who only came for shelter, not for you. And now, you wonder why you feel so tired, so unseen, so unprotected. Because kindness, when offered without boundaries, becomes a form of self-erasure. You didn't just give. You gave past your own breaking point. You stayed too long. You forgave too quickly. You smiled through disrespect. And they took it all. Because in their world, your kindness wasn't sacred. It was convenient. No one told you that kindness, to the wrong eyes, looks like permission. No one warned you that silence can be mistaken for submission. You were taught to be open, but not when to close the door. You were taught to give, but never how to hold. You were taught to empathize, but not how to discern. So ask yourself, was it really kindness, or was it fear of conflict in disguise? You called it maturity, but it was exhaustion. You called it patience, but it was paralysis. You've been told that kindness is a virtue, and it can be, but only when it's conscious, only when it's chosen, only when it's paired with strength. Because real kindness doesn't say yes to everything. It knows when to walk away, when to protect, when to stop explaining and simply shut the door. You've been generous, but to people who saw you as a resource, not a person. You tried to be lovable, but in doing so, you forgot to be respected. They told you to stay kind, but never told you how to stay safe while being kind. So here it is. Kindness without power is not virtue, it's vulnerability. And if you keep giving without clarity, you'll keep bleeding for people who bring knives instead of care. They say you've changed, that you've grown colder, more distant, less nice. Let them talk, because the version they miss was never truly you. It was the performance they benefited from. Now, you're no longer playing that role. You've stopped handing out access to people who only know how to take. And that is not cruelty. That's intelligence. Because the strongest kindness is the one that chooses who to protect and who to walk away from. They told you your innocence was beautiful, that your wide eyes made you pure, that not knowing the darkness of the world meant you were still good. They praised your softness, your patience, your blind trust. And for a while, you believed them. You thought that holding on to innocence was some kind of higher path, that by staying untouched, you were rising above the chaos. But ask yourself, what exactly has that innocence protected you from while you kept your hands clean? They were sharpening their knives. While you stayed humble, they claimed the credit. While you gave second chances, they prepared their third betrayal. And still, you called that strength. You convinced yourself that staying soft meant staying strong, that staying naive meant staying moral. But it didn't. It only made you useful to those who needed a pawn, not a peer. Because the truth is this: innocence is not rewarded. It is used, drained, consumed. You were trained to stay soft, so others could stay dominant. To stay trusting so others could keep deceiving. And the more blind you remained, the easier it was for them to shape you. They called your silence peace. They called your confusion humility. They called your fear of conflict emotional maturity. But in reality, your innocence was a cage. Beautiful, shiny, gilded, but still a cage. You were raised to worship light, but no one taught you how to carry the dark. You were told to avoid anger, but never how to use it wisely. You were told to stay gentle, but never shown how to defend yourself without guilt. And so, you walked into a world ruled by wolves, wearing flowers. You called it being good, but they called it what it was, an easy target. So now, look back and ask yourself, how many people have feasted on the innocence you protected? How many times did your patience cost you years? How many times did your forgiveness cost you safety? How many times did your hope keep you stuck in someone else's control? You thought your innocence was your light, but it was their leverage. And the moment you stop pretending, you begin to see clearly, not with rage, but with clarity, not to hurt them, but to finally stop hurting yourself. Because real awareness does not kill your kindness. It gives it teeth. It teaches you how to protect it, how to direct it, how to stop bleeding for those who only sharpen their knives when you reach out your hand. You don't have to become cruel. You have to become awake. Because the world isn't run by the innocent. It's run by the aware, the ones who observe, who adjust, who choose. Not with fear, but with precision. And when that awareness arrives, you stop calling yourself weak for walking away. You stop feeling guilty for saying no. You stop explaining why you no longer let people handle you with unwashed hands. They'll say you've changed. Let them. Because the old version of you, the innocent version, was never free. Only now are you starting to live. It doesn't begin with rage or revenge. It begins with seeing. The first breath of real power is not a scream. It's recognition, a shift in how your eyes meet the world. You stop asking, why did they hurt me, and start asking, why didn't I see it? That one shift changes everything. Because once you begin to observe, you stop reacting. You stop playing the part. You step off the stage. You sit in the shadows and start watching the script. You notice the twitch before the lie, the pause before the manipulation, the kindness that hides a hook, the silence that isn't peace but pressure. You no longer rush to respond. You slow down. You listen beyond words. You scan the motive behind the smile. And here's what most never realize. Power doesn't come from motion. It comes from restraint. The strategist moves last because he sees most. You stop chasing closure. You watch who avoids accountability. You stop trying to be understood. You start learning who is unworthy of explanation. You begin to see how often people use guilt to trap you, kindness to disarm you, compliments to confuse you. And instead of flinching, you take note. You stop showing your whole hand. You let silence speak first. You begin to say less. But every word becomes deliberate. Because now, you're not reacting to people. You're reading them. Not to judge, but to prepare. Because clarity is preparation. And preparation is power. They taught you to talk, to explain, to share, but no one taught you how to read the room, to watch for contradiction, to feel for tension, to track the quiet patterns beneath the noise. You begin to ask better questions. What do they fear? What do they crave? What are they hiding, and what am I allowing by not naming it? This is the shift. You stop being the one trying to win conversations. You become the one who doesn't need to speak to control the room, because awareness changes posture. Posture changes presence, and presence changes power. People sense it. They don't know what changed, but they adjust. They speak more carefully around you. They hesitate before asking too much. They stop assuming you'll always bend, because now you carry pressure. Not aggression, not volume, but weight. The kind of weight that comes from not needing anything from anyone. You're not cold. You're conscious. You're no longer wired to please. You're wired to perceive. And that makes you dangerous. Not because you seek to harm, but because you can't be fooled by pretty lies anymore. The game changes when you realize you were always in one, and now you finally know the rules. From the moment you could speak, they taught you something dangerous. Be likable. Be pleasant. Be agreeable. If people like you, they said, you'll be safe. So you obeyed. You adjusted your tone. You smiled when uncomfortable. You stayed silent just to keep the peace. Because you believed acceptance meant protection. But what they never told you was this. Being liked is not safety. It's a trap, because the more you adjust to please, the less of you remains. You become soft, smooth, palatable, forgettable, and still, they want more. You say yes, and they expect you to always say yes. You forgive, and they test how far you'll bend. You listen, and they assume you have no voice. You thought being agreeable would shield you, but it only taught them how to push you further. Because in a world that feeds on advantage, likability is just another form of leverage. They praise your kindness while using it. They applaud your patience while draining it. They call you good, but they never call you powerful. So, ask yourself, has being liked ever protected you, or has it only made you easier to ignore? You gave everything to be understood, to be accepted, to be enough. But approval is addictive, and the more you need it, the more control they have. What begins as politeness becomes performance, and soon, you're acting in a role you didn't audition for. The quiet one, the flexible one, the one who never says no. But what if you stopped? What if you let them dislike you? What if you chose to be respected instead of adored? Because here's the truth. The world doesn't bend for the most liked. It bends for the most grounded, for those who can stand alone, speak less, but carry weight. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to shout. You just have to stop asking for permission to take up space. Because when you no longer need to be liked, you become unpredictable, uncontrollable, unapologetic. And that is when people finally start to respect you, not because you tried harder, but because you stopped trying. You became whole not by being agreeable, but by being true. Let them misunderstand. Let them pull back. Let them label you as difficult. That label is often what freedom feels like at the beginning. Because when you stop chasing acceptance, you start attracting alignment. And that is when the room changes because of you. You've spent your life explaining your thoughts, your pain, your choices, to people who already decided you were wrong. You explained to earn peace, to earn permission, to feel safe. But they were never listening. They weren't curious. They were controlling. And every word you gave them was another inch of power they didn't deserve. Because explanation, to the wrong person, is not clarity. It's currency. You thought if you explained yourself well enough, you'd be understood. But they weren't looking for truth. They were looking for angles. and you gave them all of yours. Every time you spoke from guilt, from fear, from the need to be seen, you diluted your presence. So stop. Stop explaining. Start influencing. Because real power doesn't beg to be heard. It doesn't need to prove. It doesn't seek to be understood. It speaks to shift reality. You don't move people by convincing them. You move them by becoming undeniable. Your silence becomes a question. Your glance becomes a test. Your words, few but surgical. You're no longer trying to be clear. You're watching. Who's ready to receive? You say less, but everything you say lands with weight. You listen longer, because most people reveal themselves without knowing it. You don't interrupt. You don't overshare. You don't try to win, because the one who speaks least often sees most. They assume you're passive, but what you are is precise. You're not ignoring them. You're reading them, storing data, tracking pressure points. And when you speak, you choose your words like a blade, not to hurt, but to cut through illusion. This is influence, not volume, not charm, not repetition. Influence is presence. When presence is sharpened by restraint, people begin to adjust around you, not because you demand it, but because your stillness creates pressure. They don't know what changed, but they feel it. They listen closer. They speak softer. They think twice. You stop chasing agreement. And now, you are felt. Because the truth is, you don't need to be understood. You need to be respected. You don't need to explain your soul to people who've never met their own. Let them wonder. Let them fill in the blanks. You stopped broadcasting. You started positioning. And that's the shift from noise to gravity. There comes a moment when the noise fades, and suddenly, you're alone. No applause, no advice, no one to clap when you keep going. And it hits you. No one is coming. Not your parents, not your friends, not the mentor you kept hoping for. No one, just you. And in that silence, you feel a fear no one talks about. What if this is it? What if it's always been this way? But here's the truth. That silence, that solitude is not punishment. It's your forge, where illusions burn, where masks melt, where everything you thought you needed falls away. And for the first time, you meet the real you, the one beneath the approval, the performance, the need to be needed, alone. You discover what's yours, and what was never meant to be, because strength that requires company was never strength. It was validation. Real power comes from walking into the silence and finding yourself whole. No echo, no mirror, just you. And that's enough. They told you being alone was failure. But what if it's initiation? What if solitude isn't the absence of love but the presence of truth? Because here, no one's watching. No one's clapping. No one's saving you. And still, you rise. You keep going. You sharpen your mind. You listen to your body. You sit with your shadows until they stop scaring you. And then you become untouchable. Not because you're hard, but because you're whole. You don't chase. You don't cling. You don't beg to be understood. You walk alone and carry weight, because solitude was never the enemy. It was the training ground. The ancient chamber where kings were born not by blood but by choice. You survived the silence. Now the world can no longer drown you in noise. Let them gather. Let them celebrate each other. Let them fear being left out. You're not missing out. You're tuning in, because when you stop fearing being alone, you become the person no one can shake. Reality doesn't bend for the loudest voice. It bends for the quietest conviction. It doesn't submit to those who chase. It shifts for those who stand still long enough to become inevitable. You've spent a lifetime chasing love, chasing approval, chasing purpose. You moved faster, spoke louder, worked harder, and still, you fell behind. Because you were moving in a direction designed by someone else. You were never behind. You were misaligned. But now, you stop. You stop running toward their expectations. You stop sprinting toward conditional love. And in that stillness, you remember. Power doesn't chase. Power chooses. When you stop begging the world to see your worth, you start shaping the world with your presence. You're no longer asking, where do I fit? You're asking, where do I build? You stop seeking seats at their table. You start carving your own from stone. And suddenly, you're not waiting. You're moving time. You're not adapting. You're designing. You're not reacting. You're redirecting. Because here's what they don't tell you. The game was never about chasing. It was about becoming the gravity that pulls everything toward you. People feel it. They don't understand it. But they adjust. They speak differently. Offer differently. Respect differently. Because you stopped performing and started aligning. You no longer carry desperation. You carry direction. You no longer trade truth for connection. You walk in truth, and connection that can't hold it disappears on its own. Your life begins to reflect not what you want, but what you allow. And you only allow what aligns. No more proving. No more pleasing. No more begging. You speak. You build. You move. And the world moves with you. Because when you stop chasing, you signal that you've arrived. Not with noise, but with presence. Not with permission, but with posture. You're not demanding power. You're carrying it. And reality has no choice but to bend. They tried to break you by making you doubt yourself. They didn't need chains. They used silence. They used absence. They used shame. They taught you to explain, to please, to wait, to hope. But something happened. You stopped. You stopped needing them to see you, to finally see yourself. You stopped searching for love in people who never loved themselves. You stopped apologizing for your strength, for your truth, for your presence. And the moment you did, they lost you. They lost the version they could manipulate. They lost the version who would fold for comfort. They lost the version who traded silence for peace. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not cruel. You're awake. And when a person becomes awake, they become untouchable. Not because nothing hurts, but because nothing owns them. And that is the real beginning of your life. Let it burn. Let it echo. Let it begin.